Imagine wanting to sign a mortgage only to find out that the monthly payment is higher than your entire household income. This isn't a hypothetical scenario, it's the harsh reality revealed in our ranking. We analysed data, compared salaries and housing prices, and compiled the blacklist of the 10 European countries where the housing crisis is most ruthless. And the paradox? Many of these nations, due to historical and cultural reasons, have some of the highest home ownership rates in Europe. But today, that legacy has become completely out of reach for young people and new families. Is renting the only way out? Type rent in the comments, and we'll find out together in another video. Welcome to Amazing Europe, number 10, Hungary. Imagine finding your dream home, crunching the numbers, and discovering that paying the mortgage would require 127.1% of your household income. Exactly. Not only would every single cent of your earnings disappear, but you'd end up going into debt every single month. Let's clarify something first. Our source, Nambio, uses a standardized method for its calculations. A 90 square meter home with an average price between city centre and suburbs. The income considered is household income, calculated as 1.5 times the average net salary, assuming a second working adult. Mortgage costs are calculated over a 20-year term, so how is such a disaster possible in Hungary? The short answer, a runaway price explosion. Since 2010, prices have skyrocketed by 234%, growing 4 times faster than the European average. Two key factors triggered this perfect storm. First, the boom in short-term rentals, especially in Budapest, drained the housing market, slashing supply and pushing prices through the roof. Second, a government aid program that backfired. With the CSOK initiative, families had more cash, but sellers, sensing an opportunity, simply raised prices, absorbing every cent of the subsidy and inflating the housing bubble. And here's where it gets even more bitter. While nearly 3 million Hungarians live in housing poverty, there are 500,000 empty homes across the country. The result of this paradox? For that same family, buying a home means saving every single euro they earn without spending a cent for 13 long years. Number 9. Bosnia and Herzegovina. Here, a 20-year mortgage payment devours your entire salary. 99.7% of a family's income disappears just to cover housing. And this doesn't just mean tightening your belt. It means literally having no money left for bills, groceries, or transportation. It's an even more brutal figure when you realise that the average net salary barely reaches 670 euros, a totally inadequate amount for building any kind of future. But be careful. The culprit isn't what you think. Interest rates are low. So, what's the real problem? A nonsensical housing price surge. Prices rose by over 10% in just the past year, adding to previous increases year after year, creating a snowball effect that has turned home ownership into a luxury for the privileged few. The instinctive reaction is, okay, forget mortgages, I'll rent. Wrong. That door is closed too. The rental market is a mission impossible, with landlords preferring the quick profits of tourism over long-term tenants. This creates a perfect trap. Cities are unaffordable, but the countryside offers no jobs. And the only way out for many? Emigration. A brain drain that's slowly hollowing out the country. And for those who stay, the final number hits like a punch to the gut. Buying a home would take 13.2 full years of income. Number 8. Moldova. Is there anything worse than a mortgage that eats up your whole income? Yes. A mortgage that requires more than what you earn. That's the reality that puts Moldova in 8th place on our list. With an average net salary of just around 550 euros, the mortgage-to-income ratio hits a surreal number, 149.5%. To buy a home, one salary isn't enough. You need 1.5. The cause? A perfect storm. Housing prices have literally doubled in just 4 years, reaching the highest point in the country's history. Over the past 5 years, price growth has been 10 times faster than in the 5 years before. A crazy acceleration, fueled by a dangerous paradox. Access to credit, through programs like Prima Casa Plus, has become easier. But instead of helping, it poured fuel on the fire of speculation, with 60% of buyers forced into debt. The result? A capital city, Chisinau, where a single dorm room can cost the same as an entire high-quality house in a village. And the final verdict, the price-to-income ratio, confirms the depth of the abyss. It takes 13.3 full years of salary to pay off a home, a financial nightmare in one of Europe's poorest countries. Number 7. Czech Republic. There's one number that tells this story better than any percentage. A human, brutal number. In the Czech Republic, there are over 50,000 homeless people, one of the highest rates in Europe relative to population. This is no coincidence, but the direct consequence of a housing crisis that puts the country in 7th place on our list. Here, housing prices have risen at the fastest pace in the entire European Union, up 140% in just a decade. But salaries have only grown 3 times less. The result? Paying off a mortgage requires 112% of a family's income, despite an average salary of nearly €1,500. So the issue isn't earnings, but rather skyrocketing prices, especially in Prague and other major cities. It's a sick housing market, where hundreds of thousands of empty apartments are held purely as investments, while families are left with nowhere to go. Desperation has reached such a point that people have started discussing 50-year mortgages. Half a century of debt for a home. And this brings us back to that first number, those 50,000 homeless people, many of whom are Czech citizens themselves. The final data point confirms the tragedy. It takes 13.5 years of full salary to buy a home, a sentence that's pushing many people out of the market and sometimes out of a roof entirely. Number 6. Ukraine. In a nation already engulfed in a brutal war on its own soil, there's a second silent battlefield. The fight for a place to call home. Ukraine ranks 6th, but holds a blood-chilling record. Here, the statistics read like a death sentence. To pay off a 20-year mortgage, a family would need an impossible 253.3% of their income. It's the highest figure in all of Europe. One salary isn't enough. 2 salaries aren't enough. You'd need 2.5 just to afford a home, all while the average wage barely exceeds €400. The war has displaced millions, triggering an internal exodus that's caused rent prices to explode in safer cities. And amid the chaos, even government assistance, like the Eocelia program, hides a cruel paradox. It offers lower interest mortgages, but housing prices are so high that even a discounted payment is still out of reach for ordinary people. So who benefits? Not families, but the construction sector. These loans are a lifeline for builders, not real support for citizens. And the final blow? 13.6 years of full salary just to buy a home. A financial sentence stacked atop a human tragedy, pushing Ukraine's housing crisis to a level unmatched in Europe. Number 5. Kosovo. Imagine a country where the average salary is around €500, but renting a small studio apartment in the city centre at nearly €300 a month eats up more than half of that income. This brutal clash between earnings and expenses lands Kosovo in 5th place on our list. If renting is a struggle, buying is just a mirage. In the capital, Pristina, property prices have soared past €1,550 per square metre, an insane figure for the local economy, driven by a wave of speculation that caused prices to jump by 25% in a single year. And when these prices meet a mortgage, the result is a mathematical wall. The monthly payment swallows up 100.7% of a family's income. The explanation is simple and ruthless. Your salary is gone before you've even paid for the house, an insurmountable barrier for the vast majority of young people. But the real measure of the crisis is the price-to-income ratio. To pay off a home, you'd need 13.7 years of full wages. It's a housing market that seems built not for citizens, but for investors, leaving an entire generation facing a cruel choice, a lifetime of renting or emigration. Number 4. Slovakia. What happens when the dream of homeownership becomes a national obsession? It creates the highest homelessness rate in all of Europe. In Slovakia, over 71,000 people are without a roof. That's 131 homeless for every 10,000 inhabitants, the highest figure across the continent. And the cruelest part? 15% of them are children. The root of the problem is a broken system. Culturally, everyone wants to own a home, but for those who can't afford to buy, the alternatives are nearly non-existent. The rental market is so small and inaccessible that 57% of young adults aged 25 to 34 are still forced to live with their parents. Not because they don't work, but because even with an average salary under €1,200, buying is a fantasy. Property prices skyrocketed by 23% in 2021 alone, hitting historic highs, and getting a mortgage now requires a down payment that most young people simply don't have. The result? A mortgage-to-income ratio of 104.9%. Yet another country where one salary isn't enough. Remember, these stats reflect a 90 square metre home with a 20-year mortgage. And the final blow? It would take 14 full years of salary to pay it off. An entire generation trapped in their childhood bedrooms in one of the cruelest housing markets in all of Europe. Number 3. Portugal. We step onto the podium with a country that has turned its cities into a paradise for foreign investors and a nightmare for its own people. The situation is so dire that the OECD ranked Portugal the worst among its members for the gap between housing prices and income. And the numbers back it up. To pay the mortgage, a Portuguese family would have to spend 115.5% of their income. Once again, an entire salary is not enough. How did it come to this? Through a perfect storm of political choices. Years of golden visas and tax breaks for digital nomads flooded the market with money, while the explosion of short-term tourist rentals did the rest. The result? Prices have skyrocketed by 120%, double the EU average. Incredibly, according to the prestigious site Housing Anywhere, as of June 2023, a studio in Lisbon cost more than one in Amsterdam. This is speculation in its boldest form. Homes have become financial assets, completely disconnected from the reality of a country where nearly half the workers earn less than €1,000 a month. And here comes the most devastating paradox. Portugal has one of the highest vacancy rates in Europe, 12%. Entire buildings sit empty, used as piggy banks, while young people are stuck living with their parents well into their 30s. The final verdict? The price-to-income ratio says it all. It takes 14.7 full years of income to buy a home. Number 2. Albania. Here, the real estate market seems to follow no economic logic, but instead the opaque dynamics of money laundering. The official figures are damning. With an average salary barely reaching €650, an Albanian family would need to spend a surreal 127.8% of their income to cover the monthly payment on a 20-year mortgage, a figure nearly identical to that of Hungary. But the cause here is even more disturbing. In Tirana, prices have quadrupled in just 7 years, with annual increases in some areas exceeding 40%. How is that possible? The answer isn't in interest rates, which are relatively low, but in the underground economy. It's estimated that nearly €3 billion in untraceable cash is poured into the construction sector every year. It's a flood of dirty money creating a parallel market, completely disconnected from what ordinary citizens can afford. And the paradox is visible to the naked eye. Tirana is building at a rate 9 times higher than the European average, creating a surplus of 40,000 vacant homes, yet prices keep rising. The explanation is ruthless. The market has become a giant washing machine for illicit money. Capital from criminal sources is invested in buildings which, once sold, turn into clean money. In such a system, the goal isn't to give people homes, it's to launder money. This artificially inflates prices, shutting out anyone who plays by the rules. And the price-to-income ratio delivers the final blow. It would take 15.3 years of full salary to buy a home in this rigged game, one where honest citizens don't stand a chance. Before we reveal number 1 and take a quick look at the transcontinental countries, if you found this video informative, we kindly ask you to like, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell to turn on all notifications so you won't miss any of our videos about Europe. And don't forget to check out our new channel, America vs. Europe, where we rank US states, Canadian provinces, and European countries based on various factors. Also, Leave a comment with the word rent if you want us to make a video about the rental situation across Europe. Number 1. Serbia. In this country, the dream of owning a home is not just difficult, it's often a mathematical sentence. To pay off a 20-year mortgage, a Serbian family would need to spend a staggering 146.5% of their income. One salary isn't enough. You'd need almost 1.5 just to cover the mortgage. This bitter record is driven by a market many describe as pure anarchy. With an average salary struggling to reach €800, the capital Belgrade has become, relatively speaking, more unaffordable than Vienna, Rome, or Madrid. Rental prices have doubled, driven by a massive influx of Russians and Ukrainians, which led to absurdities like 14 square metre studios renting for €500 a month. And even though a recent departure of some of those expats has slightly cooled the market, the damage is already done. Students are giving up on education, and ordinary people are turning to desperate forms of shared housing. But the true root of this disaster lies elsewhere: total neglect by the state. Not a single public housing unit has been built in the past 10 years. The rental market is a lawless jungle, dominated by tax evasion. In this vacuum, housing has stopped being a right. It's now a safe haven for investors who leave apartments empty, even as the country is paradoxically facing depopulation. And the final blow? The price-to-income ratio. It takes 16 full years of household income to buy a home in Serbia. On the left, you can see the ranking we've explored so far, while on the right, you'll find the list of transcontinental countries with Armenia at the top, where it takes over 19 years of full income to afford a 90 square metre home. But since our money doesn't only disappear into housing, we recommend watching this next video where you'll discover the 10 most expensive cities to live in Europe. That's all for this video. See you next time.